Okay. Um, Hello to everybody. This is interview with Jessie Jiang. Alright, let's start with introductions. Hello everyone. I'm Chin Cheng. I'm a concept artist of 3 years working in Fashion Republic. Currently, I'm also a brand ambassador for Blacksmith School under Siu Hong, who is unfortunately not here today. So I'll be running the interview session today. Uh, so I'll just pass it on to Jessie, our guest for today.
Hey, hi everyone. I'm so sorry for missing the first session. But I am a concept artist who's currently working for Ubisoft Toronto, as you all know. If you don't mind, I can talk a bit about how my journey into the industry in general, about the timelines. It's I think it's probably 2015 or 16. I enrolled in Rhode Island School of Design under the illustration major. But however, I kind of took a turn from illustration to go into the art history just to balance out some of the points I have to earn from the school. And then in 2018, there's a little city called Ushta. They have a game institute. It's called MassDG. The full name is Massachusetts Digital Game Institute. They have summer internship almost every single year. It's a way to gather around all the students coming from the vicinity of Ushta together to make indie games, prototypes to be later developed by their own student into full-blown games. So that's where my introduction to the industry began. And then I took another internship with Deepen Games. And then in 2019, I was incredibly lucky because there was an internship opportunity at Sony Santa Monica on the God of War Ragnarok. I think that's the door opener for me. And I spent my time as a contractor working for the Ascendant Studio later before my post-graduation work permit expired in America. And now I was in Canada working for Ubisoft.
Oh, that is a crazy history. So you mentioned that you took art history to cover points for your studies. Was that it?
Yes,
I am quite
yeah,
curious. How is the experience like studying art history? I'm pretty sure it influenced you in the way you approach your designing
mhm,
works, right?
yes. Oh, definitely. I was immensely grateful for the choice of going into art history instead of studio classes. The reason behind it because RISD was not an institution that's gearing its student towards entertainment designs like Art Center. So most of the studio classes are too experimental to be applicable in concept art. Um, we don't do a lot of figurative stuff in the schools. So in order to have enough points to graduate, I have to take more liberal art classes like art history in order to meet the requirement for graduation.
I see. I am quite curious to like with all the art history stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do you actually have to go into the visuals of each era?
Yes, that's uh, That's actually incredibly helpful for people who want to, how can I say, track their way into the entertainment design because our art history has informed a lot of the modern designs. It's like a river that's constantly passing down knowledge but filtering the sand through a modern lens, the modern taste of aesthetics. So knowing a bit of the art history is actually a pretty good way to broaden one's visual library. So when you're designing things for a specific historical era or coming up something that's fantastical or science fiction, you have enough knowledge to pour from your visual library.
Yeah, that's really interesting because when you were talking about how the river of time actually influences how we think of design, how
Mhm.
even technology is also influenced. influenced by history. It kind of made me think of a series that you were doing, Listen Pena, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
So as Chinese, it actually really resonates with me. The design, the visual language of it, there's a lot of elements that reminds me of the figures I can see in Chinese temples or like
Yeah.
traditional scrolls. But there's also um this curious like detail about it that
Mhm.
they blend together so well. So I'm quite curious as like when you were designing that specifically, how did you go about blending these two elements that are so like different from each other? They're so far away.
Yes, yes. Oh, I'm glad you asked me this question. It's actually a really funny, really interesting and entertaining exercise when you think about it. How to blend something that's very archaic with something that's modern. But this is how you come up with interesting visuals in your own project. It's blending something from two very far apart timelines. So I don't know if I should share screen.
Go ahead if you want to.
Yes, yeah, I haven't been using this Google Hangout for a long time, so give me a few minutes to see if I can actually do it. Okay, am I sharing screen?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so take this design as an example. So if you search up Great Guardian Beast Tang Dynasty, you can see a lot of figures of mythical beast being served as a great deposit in the in the burials of nobilities and even in the burials of foreign merchants. So in Tang Dynasty, we have this conspicuous consumption of funerary goods. And a lot of those funerary goods, they look like maybe this is a good way. This is probably a good way to show it instead of me describing it. If you look at designs, those beautiful wavery patterns, very elegant, but also there's some how can I say, there's something very majestic about those great guardians. However, those patterns they look archaic, but if possible, there were some modern substitute for this sort of pattern. So instead of using the archaic patterns all around my design, I choose to engrave some of the electric circuit board into the surface of this creature. So I think my design principle can be summarized as sneaking in things from different era into the details of things from another era. I hope I'm making sense here.
No. Actually, it's something that us as artists we think about a lot. But I would
Mhm.
say a lot of people do struggle with the ratio of it. I would say because
Yeah.
I'm not too sure about you, but during my education, we kind of learned about the 70-30 rule.
Yes.
You get 70% of something and then you add 30% of something else. You don't really want to go like 50-50 about it.
Mhm.
I guess the struggle with a lot of people, I think me included, I'm still learning, um, is trying to contextualize everything into numbers. So when you describe it, it kind of made me think like, oh, it can actually be that simple, you know?
Yes.
That's so cool. Then what about your recent series actually? I think that one is such a blend of like I would say elements that I didn't really think of putting it together. Yeah, this one.
This one?
Like I can't really
Oh.
put my finger into what was your inspiration behind it. Like I can tell there's some
Mhm.
Greek elements because you know the title has the word like Athena in it, and then it has all these like technological like aspects of it. But the color scheme also gives me this sort of retro vibes. I think it's the orange
Yes.
and the white. But other than that, it feels like the inspirations are so abstract. I can't put my hand into. I can't say like, oh, this inspired, this is that inspired. So I'm quite curious how you came about with this project.
Yes. Oh, um, hmm. How I think the visuals actually comes from the prompts I set it up for myself. And so the background for this project, meaning the story of this project, was that in an alternative universe of 1960s, the war has ended, but the destruction was so great that the soil was treated and the ancient machines of God and monsters was unearthed by the government. But however, the world was also divided by an iron curtain, so the discovery of those mythical paths became a propaganda devices to promote this paleogenesis ideas. And research facilities were set up to research on those garden machines, trying to awaken them, use them as a blueprint for future designs. So with this proposition, I began to find the posters, the graphic designs of the 1960s about the broad stroke of, those colors of orange, of black are very identical for that era because this is probably the most used type of ink in the printing process. But however, as a coincidence, um, it's also the type of color you would see on the Greek vases. Yeah,
Oh,
it's a very nice coincidences, right?
that's so cool. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's such a small detail that links these two
Yes,
together. That's so cool. Wow.
right.
Oh, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm quite like I guess this can lead to the next question. Maybe your philosophy in your design, because I think how do I word this? I guess when a lot of people they start their own projects, um, it's very easy to get overwhelmed by the amount of information you can get. But I think your approach is uh, pretty abstract, but also it's actually really straightforward as well. Like you don't think too much about um, oh, does this make sense? Is this grounded? Can this be playable? It's really like, oh, I want to put these two together because they can look very interesting. So I'm quite curious, um, when you design, what is your philosophy? What's your thought process usually?
Mm. So, very good question. I don't actually think about it often because when we are doing designs, there's a natural instinct for us artists to gear towards a sort of images that we want to produce that represent the ideal beauty in our mind. But my design philosophy, like you said, I don't really care about why it will make sense in this alternative universe because this is an alternative universe. I just want to create something that's fresh, that can be inspirational even to myself. But to boil it down, like we previously did, when we are talking about the 70-30 rule, it can still be applied to secure a very nice balance between, where to put all the details and where to put the area of rest, or where to put details that's very identical to the archaic uh, objects, or where to put the details that could speak to a futuristic aesthetics. And also, this is a personal project, so I don't have to get into any fight with narrative or comeback designers, so it's good.
That's true. I think this is something that, at least personally, I'm still learning to kind of unlearn, like trying to make sense of everything. But it's art, not everything has to make sense. Oh, that's really cool. Well, okay, we kind of went into a deep dive about your art, and wow, it's actually like really 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 cool. Honestly, like thank you so much for sharing. Uh, I'm quite curious. Would you say your culture growing up, your childhood has influenced you and affected your art? Because oh for the listeners, Jessie's actually from China, but she came to the US and then afterwards Canada for studies and work. So technically she's a mainland Chinese. So I am quite curious, growing up and experiencing such different cultures, has it influenced you the way you think about art, or like just the way you approach maybe design?
Oh, I would absolutely say yes. The medias I grew up with are either Japanese cartoons or the Chinese ones, like Journey to Journey
Journey
to
to
the
the
West.
West.
It's like we all know that sort of cartoons. So I do believe my time in mainland. Oh, just for information, I went to the state for college. So I was grew up and raised back in mainland China. The medias I was grew up with are filled with, how can I say, the taste of Eastern storytellers, the cartoons we consume, the uh, television dramas we consume, or have something very intimate to our culture. It's either historical or on an emotional level. And I do believe this cultural background made me have a more attention to the details in my pieces. Um, and also, since the Eastern Asia, our history can be stretched into at least 5,000 years. And I was very lucky. There was a lot of museums available to me in Shanghai. So, and my parents, they also think their girl needs to be cultured, so they would rather take me to the museum instead of the common playground for the children. I thank them for that. Uh,
Oh, I
thank you
wish
for having me a normal childhood. Mhm.
I wish Malaysia had museums like that. Unfortunately, we only have like two, maybe.
Oh, damn. I wonder who is responsible, huh? Is
Hmm.
it because of the 19th century's explorers taking so many stuff from Eastern Asia?
Oh
I
yeah,
wonder why.
I think half of our loots are in the British Museum as we speak. Oh well, what can we do about it? Wow, but going to the museum as a kid, I'm guessing that's really like a childhood memory that stuck with you.
Yes. Yeah, just so my parents, they don't know anything about the exhibit, but they have to pretend they know a lot about it. So they have to read those plaques I couldn't read to me. So that's also a plus.
Is there okay, this might be too specific of a question. Was there a certain point in like
Mhm.
you know going to the museum with your parents and also like consuming all these media as a child? Was there a certain point that got you into thinking, oh, this is I want to do art for a living, and like what was it? Because for everyone
Um,
it's sort of different. It can be games, it can be books. For me,
yeah,
it was a Japanese comic. So I'm quite curious. For you, what was it?
yeah. I mean, it's definitely something about art that wrote me into this journey. I mean, the people like us who want to work as an artist for either for entertainment or for book was definitely because there was something incredible we glimpsed at in the childhood that pushes us to this road of hardship in order to acquire the skill and discipline to continue working on some piece that will consume a lot of time. So for me, I think I would actually say it's actually the movies produced by the Ghibli studio. That was I was never seeing anything so striking before. I don't think there was any other studio in the world could match their level of dedication to all the pieces they have produced. And I also think it's the fantastical nature of most of its titles has inspired me to wanting to do something that's similar to them.
I think, yeah, I actually do agree. Like Ghibli movies, they strike something. They strike something in people's heart. I think for me, it's the way they show, like the domestic side of life.
Yes.
Yeah, like the slow motions of like just walking down the road or like
Mm,
cooking up a meal. As a
yes.
as a child, I would say you get drawn into the magic of the movies. But as an adult, you get drawn into the slow motions of life.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think Ghibli is such a Ghibli is such a wonderful studio. I don't think there will be anything that comes close to it.
Mm.
What was your favorite movie though? I'm quite curious because mine was actually House Moving Castle.
Oh, that's definitely my top three. My favorite movie. Oh, it's definitely Princess Mononoke.
Oh, that's actually a bit famous, but that's actually my mom's favorite. I think it's so pretty, and it speaks a message that um I think a lot of media have tried to portray, and
Mm,
every every movie, every show, every book has portrayed it in their own ways. But I think something about Ghibli and its very pacifist approach. As we know, Hayao Miyazaki is a pacifist. Um,
mhm.
it shows the side of war in a very different light. I would say in a civilian's point of view. Yeah, I feel
Yes.
that that difference in point of view has made it so iconic. Yeah, this such a this like deep dive into Ghibli Studios. Then,
No
then
worries. I can spend almost 2 hours just talking about the movies they produce, but we
oh,
have the time limitation here. So,
then what about current influences though? Do you go to something to get inspired constantly? Maybe like certain media or music. For me, it's actually still like uh Japanese anime shows or like mangas.
it's a very good source of references. The movement, the paneling of the mangas, they are so dynamic and so critical to the storytelling. I think a lot of us can learn from them, either for the compositional purposes or if you're working as a storyboarder. There's always something to be learned from those Japanese manga artists. They are awesome. Um, the media that can be a lot of influences in um, recent years. Um, Sadly, I wouldn't say there were many, but I was not only looking at the animation produced by Japan, but also some animation produced by France. There was a recent animated movie. It's called Mars Express. I don't know if you have heard of it. It's a very beautiful 2D animated movie about um, a dystopian future, but it was wrapped in this beautiful plastic presentation of scientific, how can I say, revolution. There were a lot of sectors of society were produced or replaced by the androids, and some of the androids are replicas of past people. It was a very beautiful, not only in the sense of animation, but also in the sense of storytelling. It went, but the movie went from a detective case to a case about the existence of humanity itself, but it was rendered in a way that's so quiet, unlike the other cyberpunk titles that everything goes out in a bang. This movie was like walking gently into that silent night. I think people should take a look at it to learn from not only its quiet aesthetics, but also, um, how it handles this futuristic time, but it was also taking a lot of time from the retro-futuristic aesthetic period. Oh, the movie's name is called Mars Express.
Mars Express. Oh, Mars has seen the planet.
Yes.
Ah, I see. Oh, I gotta check that out later. It sounds very interesting. Actually, when you were talking about the story, actually reminds me of a game I really like. New Automata. Like I went into that game thinking it was just a fighting game, but it talked a lot about the human philosophy. I think that game really influenced me into wanting to get into the game industry. I don't know if um there's a game out there that did that for you.
Oh, hmm. Yeah, there were a lot. When I was in college, there was a game that was published. It's called Horizon Zero Dawn. You know,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm in love with the creatures. I was instantly grabbed by the aesthetic of the games. Those beautiful, either dinosaurs or leopard-like creatures. But how can it be rendered in a way that they were futuristic machines, but retained so much of their animalistic outlines? I think it was incredibly interesting.
Yeah, I think um like Horizon Zero Dawn especially, I think yeah, as you said, the creature designs and also the character designs, mixing the um the Native American fits
Mm,
the wirings from like our time.
yeah,
Like they
yes.
basically took what we presume as like current technology. To them it's scripts already, due to the timeline of the game and whatnot. It was such a interesting approach to design. I think not a lot of games, I think, has that sort of like creative approach.
Mm.
I think recently the movies do they have quite interesting designs as well, and I think the book opened up to a lot of people into looking into the works of the author, because he was an environmentalist as well. So
Oh,
the world of Dune was genuinely so complete and so detailed. Everyone was pretty much like blown away. I think the world building in itself was what caught everyone's eye. But yeah, I do agree. Horizon Zero Dawn was truly an amazing approach in design. Then, do you think um, what do you think about like um, current games? Is there actually any current games you're playing right now, or like
oh,
you're looking into?
oh, goodness gracious. The only AAA title I invested in recently is the Elden Ring. I
uh,
I can only blame myself for the constant pain.
it's okay. I'm playing Black Myth Wukong, so we're kind of in the same boat.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
I like have you actually uh how do I approach this question? Because Wukong has such a like insane success in the worldwide scale. I am quite curious if you've seen how it's being perceived in mainland China, because I'm not too sure if um, this is how it's viewed in China, but at least for us, the way we see it is sort of like if you're not from like the big three companies in China, it's very hard for you to make a globally known title. So
Yes.
when Yan Qing, who is actually an artist I followed for a very long time, when he announced Wukong and it had such like great reception, I was
Mhm.
actually pretty proud of the company for it. I'm
Yeah.
quite curious as to like your experience witnessing all this as a mainland Chinese.
I was ecstatic. It's as you said, it kind of inspired a certain level of pride in the game producers of the Asia because AAA titles was not very common in East Asia except for Japan. We don't really have this foundation to produce this type of game that could consume a lot of resources and also require a lot of technologies to back it up. So with the emergence of this game, it almost opened up a pathway to a lot of smaller developers in East Asia to see how they can approach this AAA title, how it's like if there has to be something they can learn from the success of Black Myth Wukong, or just simply knowing that we are able to produce something like that even with a very small team.
Yeah, that's true. I think Wukong had 60 when they first started, which was pretty crazy, watching
Mm.
the behind the scenes of how they produce the game and whatnot. I am quite curious as to like maybe this is onto the globalization of like gaming in itself, because um, when the pandemic came and everyone was sort of stuck at home, um, the game industry actually like revenue wise shot up pretty crazily, but
Mhm.
sort of hitting into a slump, a lot,
Yes.
a lot of companies are facing financial issues, people are getting retrenched. I kind of want to ask like about like your perspective of it, because I think at least as a Southeast Asian, um, the impact of it hasn't quite hit us as hard as like people who work in like say the US, Canada, or the UK, where the the main branches are based on.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely very it's definitely the problem all the people around me are talking about how did we end up there. um yeah, like I said before, AAA titles required a lot of resources to build. And in the time, like in the early 2010s, there wasn't a lot of the studio who's producing AAA titles. So I do believe they were probably facing less of a competition. And also there wasn't a lot of capital being poured into this industry and expecting unsustainable growth from the game studios. So it was a time that the industry was relatively stable. But during the pandemic, as we all know, when people are being forced to stay in home, they have to find a substitution, a way of entertainment. So video game was the food to go. But however, this kind of portrayed an illusion that the game industry, the world, will experience this unexpected and unsustainable growth. Therefore, it kind of caused up a lot of capitals to be invested in this industry. However, it's not sustainable. And once the pandemic is over, when people returning to their normal ways of life, it's not looking good for the developers who invested into the game industry too much. But also, the AAA industry is also growing stagnant because I think we have exhausted almost all the format we can have for what people expect from a AAA title. We are seeing too many open world, but seeing too little innovation to be put into it. that's also kind of pouring cold water to the player who was once passionate about this type of game, but now they're just seeing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I do agree on a lot of your points. I think something I like to add up is I would say the emergence of double A or even like indie games. Like even though the triple A game industry is kind of hitting a glass ceiling right now, but the emergence of double A and indie games has I think bring out so much innovation and like
Yes.
new fresh flavor into the game industry. So as artists for AAA game titles, I am quite curious what's your perspective of smaller budget games coming up now,
Yes.
because I myself, I think my only project has been, I think, is what's considered a triple A project, but I think the emergence of double A and indie games has pushed quite a lot of people who are attracted to the triple A hyper realistic stylization. I think it has pushed people to realize that I think we should go back into the more artistic side of games. So I'm quite curious, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah. I have to say, indie games, they just never disappoint. Also, there was a lot of risk of smaller studios producing their own games. They have to face a lot of things. How do you market it? How do you distribute the budget? And how are you sure this game that's so alien to the market was success? But I am so glad they a lot of studios tried and succeeded, and also indie game meaning that they're taking a lot of risk because they're passionate about the project they're making. There's always a sense of earnest in the work they produced. And like I said, we see success in indie game a lot, even when they're just like double A, or even with a smaller budget. Oh goodness. Like I can name so many of them. Shovel Knight, Hollow Knight, also
Hollow
Stardew
Knight,
Valley.
yes.
They were like there's Stardew Valley was produced by one single person. And recently there was the studios that produced Grease who presented with us their another game, Never. Beautiful, beautiful 2D approach that's so fresh to the eye. It's yeah, I think, well, here we have this AAA title stagnation in their hyper-realistic approach. So it really kind of buffed up the signals of the indie scene where the styles are so free, the visuals are so fresh. I also I never worked on how can I say something that could be considered indie before, but I am just so glad for them.
Yeah, it's true. Like I personally, I like triple A, like such as like Elden Ring, Your Automata, Black Myth
Mm,
right now. But I think indie games has such a like I don't know how to say this, but humane. Um, it evokes such like humane emotions in
mm,
personally, because I think when it's such a small team working on a project, the narrative feels like it's that team telling me their story rather than a big corporation trying to sell me a story.
yes.
I think something about that makes me feel very attached to them when I play them.
Mm,
Yeah, I think then what would you say for I think a lot of um fresh graduates, when they started college, it was during the pandemic when gaming is basically on its like all-time high, but they are graduating at such a, I guess, unstable times to find work. Yeah. What what would you what would you say to them? Because I think quite a lot of our viewers and participants actually are
Mm.
fresh graduates. You know, they're trying to figure themselves out in this time of turmoil.
Oh goodness. It's really unfortunate for them. The game veterans haven't been pacing a good way for the newcomers. It's I also, because my I am an alumni of RISD, and I the students coming from my college also reached out to me about the current situation in the industry. Right now, I really couldn't offer any advice that could be, how can I say, that could work in the instant, but know that it was actually very common for concept artists who couldn't find or land a studio job right away when they graduated from college. The colleagues I worked with, they actually, when they graduated, they would work in the restaurants and tending the bars before they landed a job in the studio, even in the time when the AAA industry is stable. Um, but if there were actually other disciplines that have quite similar requirements compared to concept artists, like you know, the theme parks, restaurants, interior designs, they all need a visualization before a project can begin. So probably looking into the companies that does visual services could also be another way, if it's diverging from the game industry, but you can still gather experience from it. If the game industry is unstable, maybe looking for adjacent industry, it's a good way to go.
I do agree with what you're saying. I think it is a pretty hard pill to swallow. You're struggling to work into games but you end up not doing it. But I think this has become sort of a bitter reality, not just our industry, but I think in a lot of industries, you know, with the emergence of AI. I think a lot of jobs, especially um, copywriters and authors, they are slowly using tools to create AI as well. I think as artists, we are also, using one-on-one with AI sometimes. I am quite curious. I guess we can kind of jump into the next part, which is like, has AI impacted you as an artist, or like, what is your view of AI in design?
Yeah, definitely. The answer is 100% yes. When I was searching up the job postings online for me or just for my friends, we can see the trend of the request for junior artists is in constant decline and become non-existent of nowadays. But however, to integrate AI into production would face a lot of problem, not only the copyrighted problem, because it's also the problem that they're good for producing images that looks good in the first glance, but couldn't really be used in the actual production. Uh, it's um I have to say it's a hard time because the people who are making decisions, they usually do not see the value of artists who would take the input and then come out with output that was very tailored towards the production requirement. I'm afraid the people who are in charge of hiring wouldn't see it. Um, and we also all know that a lot of studio closures or just massive layoffs, not only because of the decline of game industry, but also if you see if there's a cost costing measurement out there, I do believe a lot of people with capital will swarm into the measurement. Mm, but however, uh, as artists, we all worked on our discipline tirelessly in order to acquire the foundation and later the skill to design something that could speak to a lot of people. Um, it was, I do not think it's attainable by the machine. It's the human input that's very specific to our time and influences that was allowing us to produce work that could resonate with others. And as someone who started art history, you know, art history was the record of human history. The archaeological finds, a lot of them usually comes from the great deposit, the artifact that was left behind by our predecessors. So from the first handprint of Paleolithic era, when you see this human hand appearing onto the stonework, and later in the Neolithic era, the hand was then replaced by the human figures of hunting, of rituals. This is the beginning of human consciousness of but was represented by image making, and all of those history was lost to us if there was no artist behind it.
That's true. I think also another thing, talking about the Hellenistic era, when it's basically in layman terms the caveman era, such thing as occupation. Everyone was sort of a community just surviving. The fact that a community that did not have the view of like value of entertainment as us now. Now we have social media, we have art, we have arts and entertainment. But back then it was a matter of basically hunting, gathering, and surviving the winter. But in such times where survival was at the top, art was still me. I feel like it really spoke to the human conscious. So I do agree when it comes to conveying the human emotion, AI can never replace that. But I think another point I'd like to touch on is art and design. So on our last roundtable talk, I actually did ask Jessica and Khadijah about AI. So curiously, Jessica actually uses AI in her work, but it was only for the visual part because, but she has also explained that us as architects, there's no way AI can replace architects because they're making buildings for people to reside on. It's not a matter of just a pretty building. It's a pretty building that has to stand, that has to withstand earthquakes because she's based in Japan. Has to withstand like typhoons and whatnot. So I think as concept artists, because things are in either 2D space or 3D space, people see it as very abstract. But when you talk about art and design, when you talk about AI, when you ask AI to just design a car, that car's not gonna move. I think this is something not just big corporations need to think about, but I think young artists as well. I think young artists can get influenced by what's the new trending thing.
Yes.
Yes, personally, I've seen some examples, and I don't know. I think for me, AI can be a tool, but you cannot be controlled by the machine. I think. Um, what about you, Brian? Quite curious.
Oh, absolutely. If the scenario is that your studio has advised the artists to use AI, just follow them, but try to not use it in your personal work. It's just as a dignity and discipline of an artist, I would refuse to use AI. But however, if the situation has forced certain artists to do so, I do not think they need to feel pressure to uphold their standard. However, my stance on the AI was pretty negative, so I think we should probably switch to another title. Yes, sadly.
It's okay, it's okay. Yeah, but I think I agree with majority with what you said. I think uh AI is sort of like, I guess, when Blender and photo bashing was
Mm,
introduced, you know, years and years ago, it was such frowned upon. But I think there's a lot of nuances to AI that I think a lot of people need to consider before drawing to certain conclusions. For me personally, I also don't really wish to use AI in my personal work, but I think if it's used to just produce, like, just textures, like if I want
yeah.
that fur texture, like if it's for 3D modelers, if that thing can fix the topology, I love AI. But
Absolutely.
currently it's taking. I think there was a post about it I saw somewhere. We wanted we invented machines to help us do the boring jobs, but why are we inventing AI to do the interesting jobs? I think
Uh,
I think that's, like, it kind of wraps up what we all
mhm,
think in a nice little bowl. But
yes.
we were talking about fresh graduates, or, like, current students and whatnot. I think a scenario I'm starting to witness is,
Mm-hmm.
so for context, I'm actually part of the hiring team in my company. So we do see a lot of fresh graduates and a lot of candidates, and I think something I'm starting to witness in a lot of candidates is, I think, I'm not too sure if this is the influence of studying from home, the pandemic, the lack of, like, human
Mm-hmm.
connection. I feel like a lot of fresh graduates are actually struggling with soft skills and networking.
Uh,
I'm not too sure if that's the case, because you did mention you had fresh graduates from your college messaging you.
yeah. Oh, I am so glad I got messaged because it's like we all know, soft skills are quite important. Also, we are artists. Most of us are introverted. We want to hide underneath the rock and just do our things. But however, no, the society has forced us to socialize. How dare them? Um, the thing I would suggest, the the newly graduate to do, even if it's out of their comfort zone, was try to reach out to the artist they admire. Just type a little message saying how much I loved your work, or if possible, could you give me some advice on my portfolio? I wouldn't think it's too much of botherance for a lot of the artists, even if they are too busy and do not reply to you. I think it's okay. Just it's a sting, but it will pass within 2 to 3 days. Um, it's just a small step people can take in order to how can I say, push them out of the comfort zone they were put into in the pandemic, where they all sealed inside of their home and severed possibility of, socialization. But it, the skill can be learned back gradually just by some little things, joining a Discord group of artists, or just commenting under the comment section of the artists you follow, or under your friends comment section. Yeah, once you have done it, once you have, how can I say, repeat those steps for several times, I think you are good to go into this society.
I think okay, oh my god, my thought just left my head like that. I was gonna ask something. Oh, right. So, other than just networking skills, do you think there's a certain trait that artists should have, but I guess it's something that's less talked about?
Hmm, that's, that's a very tough question. You caught me off guard.
Like,
Oh,
I think for me personally,
mhm.
it's curiosity and, like, research. I think a very good
Yes.
example is like, just by seeing your work, and also like, also, when you sent the resume and I saw like that extensive art history. I think it really showed, it was a really shining example of like how much in-depth knowledge can like push your art. I think that's
Yeah.
something for me is a trait that artists don't really talk about, but it's something that's actually so important in our day-to-day job.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Now you have reminded me. Um, there's a way. It's like you don't have to be an art history student to know the art history because right now we have so many historical podcasts available online for free. And also, when students are struggling about how do I come up with something that's interesting, that's innovational, I think they need to build up their foundation, not only their history, but their subsectionist, how can I say, their library of stories just by listening to audiobooks when they are doing paintings, when we can go to the autopilot mode to, render out the details. It's a really good time to start the audiobooks and let other stories to influence us.
It's quite curious, like we're constantly thinking about, um oh, I want to do something new, I want to do something
Mhm.
creative. I think what a lot of, um I would say, new artists, when they think that, they actually stray further away from historical tales of folklore. But a lot of innovative artwork, especially, I think it's very much influenced by different stories we hear. I think a lot of people don't know that. It sounds very cynical, but there's no there's no new art in a way. We're constantly being influenced by what we see, what we learn, but because um you know humans, everyone has a very unique life, so your perception of it is very different. I think that's something that um a lot of people, I think, we learn as we go. you know
Yeah,
yeah, that's really interesting. Well, I think this is something that I think should have been like mentioned before, but I think I'm just gonna throw it in here. But um I guess, are you involved in, interacting with like candidates when it comes to the company, or?
actually, only in a specific situation. Ubisoft Next was a program very specific to the Toronto studio. They asked for submissions of college graduates around the Ontario region for their portfolio and for their entry into this competition, where they would invite the winners to have an internship at Ubisoft, and most of the winners, they got their contract extended and then become a permanent employee at Ubisoft Toronto. This tradition has been there for a lot of years, and that was the only time when I was involved in the hiring, uh, because I was one of the judges for 2 years.
I see. Because the question I was gonna ask is like, between a student who has like really good work, but
Mhm.
maybe say has more coding skills, versus a student who is very very good at communication and networking, but maybe they're more of an average artist. Personally,
Um,
what would be your pick?
oh, that's a very good question. In the 2 years when I was serving as a judge for Ubisoft Next, um, the situation has popped out in both of the 2 years. We have candidates whose, how can I say, whose skills are tied with each other. But however, if one looks like more communicative, we will definitely elect onto that candidate. But however, when the candidates exhibit incredible confidence and the fluidity of their thought in their work processes, I think my instinct will go to that candidates, but however, I would also saw the other candidates. They worked incredibly hard. The pieces they have submitted was enormous. They definitely poured their heart into their work. So I think for these two times, our decision was to pick the candidates whose work spoke for themselves in the end. Like I said, the soft skill could always be acquired, but because of the nature of this competition, it's it's the work that speaks to the artists.
That's quite interesting actually, because during the roundtable talk, I think the common consensus was leaning on the soft skills one.
Yes.
It's quite interesting answer, because yeah, actually you make a very valid point. I think artists, expressing ourselves through our art is basically our strongest medium.
Mhm.
um I would say, when it comes to Jessica and me, I would say, because Jessica is an architect, we work with clients and we talk to them so much.
Oh,
Soft
right.
skills was such a big part. I think I'm not too sure, but I think the main difference is I think me and Jessica's line of work is more on outsourcing, even though I myself work in game development. Our company deals more with clients from the UK and US, or like Japan. We we do in-house games, but it's sort of maybe 30-40% compared to the outsourcing work. So it's quite interesting how, we may work in the same field, but the different circumstances can bring about different ways of thinking. That's really interesting. Okay, so this is actually part of the Q&A section, but I think this is something that we can, just slowly transition. So I think I sent it to you last time when roundtable talk happened, but I think we can just chat about it right now. So the question is actually two questions. You can choose to answer them separately or together. That's up to you. So the question is, what suggestion or advice will you give for fresh graduates that lack of originality and creativity? And the other one is, what is your opinion or advice on artists who want to join the art industry?
Right. Oh, because I was absent the last time, so I kind of type up the script I prepared for you and pushed it to your email. Oh goodness. So let's say I would answer the suggestion I have for a fresh graduate who's concerned about their originality in their own work. First, it's this is like the question that was constantly plaguing us concept artists. It's as if our dignity is constantly under attack. How do I do something that's different, that's original? I mean, this is how we produce things that was incredible, right? Um, because as a fresh graduate, we just went out from our ivory tower, from the school setting. We are receiving information from the outside. So there was so much room for one to grow in those circumstances. Um, and because also in the college times we are so concerned with our course, there wasn't a lot of time for entertainment for us. So now we have the time. It's good to expand our visual library. The more books we listen to, the more books we read, the more, the cartoons, animated shows, movies we watch. It's more ways to broaden our visual libraries. And we artists are constantly influenced by our peers and our environment. Just know that you can always pick the information you have researched, you have gathered from your visual library and piece them into something that speaks to you. This is where one's originality was created because the artwork was always very personal.
Hmm. Yeah, I think this also, goes back to what we're talking everyone's experience is unique to themselves. So I
Mhm.
think also draw from your own experiences. If you haven't experienced the world in a way, it's very hard for you to convey that. Yeah. But
Mm.
so the next question actually just reminded me there was something I forgot to ask, but we'll just
Yeah.
into it. So the question is actually, did you feel rushed to get good at art and to get a job? If so, how did you deal with the anxiety?
Oh, oh goodness. It was very common for us, the fresh graduate to feel anxiety. I was having sleep issues in my final years in college. It's okay. A lot of people have experienced it, but there are certain ways we can do to reassure ourselves that our portfolio is up to industry standard. Aside from, like I said, reach out to industrial professionals to ask about the portfolio advices. Is there, like asking them, is there some point I should improve on as a character designer or as an environment concept artist? What sort of pieces should I be putting into my portfolio that when an art director sees, he or she will know that this candidate is ready for the industry. And another thing one can go about is to check out the ArtStation Art Blast, where it's the time when a work has been finished, and then the people involved in this production work has been posting the concept art they use for the production. So you can compare your work with the works posted on the Art Blast to see, is this the same type of work? Do I have all those the callouts that they would put into? So if you think your level is closing into the level of production, it's very reassuring that you will be getting hired once you graduated.
I think okay. I think this is how do I read it? I think this might be a bit awkward to transition when we're talking about
Mhm.
anxiety and whatnot. But I think there's also a lot of anxieties around the work life balance as an artist. Yeah, so we did talk about it during the roundtable talk where a lot of students unfortunately graduates, they're very worried about like work life balance. I don't want to be doing work outside of my 9 to 5. And
Mhm.
so during the roundtable talk, I think we sort of saw it as like, for me at least, doing art outside of my 9 to 5, it feels more like a fulfilling hobby more than a job. So we didn't really understand the question itself, but I'm not too sure about it. So I'm quite curious to how you see this question.
Yeah, work-life balance is very important. So um, it's the standard that all the companies they should uphold. It's to just let your employee work 9 to 5, no overwork. So as artists, we have time to rest our hand and also do some exercises because carpal tunnel, it's the problem a lot of my peers is facing, but also it's saving time for us to grow and learn. Like when we are doing our personal works, we might want to incorporate some different workflows, incorporate different 3D software into our personal project. But however, in the work situation, we will never find time or the energy to do so. So if the company has good practices of strict work hours, we have more time to give into ourselves, either to improve our skill. It's also a hobby to just paint a draw. It was very soothing for a lot of people, or to go out and socialize with friends.
What about um in a situation where artists may say like, oh, I don't want to do anything concept
Ah,
art related outside my work hours, because I have met people who like they see being a concept artist as purely just a job, just a 9 to 5, and
Mhm.
they don't want to do anything work related outside work hours. And I think that was a matter of a clash on mindsets, I would say, because for me at least, art is my work, but also art is what I love to do. So
Yeah.
when the way I saw it was, at that time my work was actually pretty good. My client was really nice, and it was such a
Mhm.
interesting project. So it's very cliche, but I really did feel like I wasn't really working. Yeah. So, but when it comes to a situation like that, when it's people who truly don't want to do anything art related outside of their work hours, I'm quite curious. What is your take on that?
Oh, that's it's their personal choice. I don't see anything wrong with it. Um, but uh, but however, we are like the opposite ways. Art, it's hobby for us. For people who only want to do concept art as a job, it's good for them because they have their off work hours to relax, to personally grow, into whoever they want to become. It's a blessing for them. But for us, we are kind of cursed with this constant anxiety of, am I good enough? It's also very natural because, the urge to grow also defines what type of person you want to become,
Mm,
right?
that's
I
true.
see. Mm.
I think it's sort of like practicing off hours. I would say maybe put it in the context of learning a language when you learn it in school. But
Yeah.
if you were to go outside of school and talk to people who speak that language, I feel like you tend to grow more. So
Mhm.
because it sort of comes down to the individuals, like what they want with their art, I would say. But yeah, quite interesting.
Yes.
So our last question is actually about getting into the game industry or the film industry. But I think due to the circumstances of the person who asked this question, I'm not too sure if you are able to answer it fully. But I think it's still very valuable to get your opinion. So the question goes, how can someone from a third world country whose country doesn't have AAA game industry nor film industry wants to step into the overseas industry,
Yes.
specifically for environment concept art, since as we know, um, environment concept art is quite a heavy title. There's not a lot of openings, and when they are, they want people who have really good skills, like visually and design wise, and also ideally you know how to do 3D. So there's a
Yes.
lot of requirements. So how can someone in these sort of circumstances tackle the situation?
Right. Yeah. So how can someone from a country whose game industry was not developed seek entry experience? I think the question can be boiled down into that. Um, So in that circumstances, I think he or she should do some research about the outsourcing group that's in the vicinity of their country or the surrounding areas, because almost all the companies I worked for, they have budget for the outsourcing team because not only because the in studio teams couldn't meet the enormous production requirement, they also want some fresh ideas is coming from someone who's outside. So a lot of companies they would tap into the resources of the Asia outsourcing groups because this is how they tap into the foreign talent pool, and therefore it's I think this is probably the safest way for one to enter into the industry and then slowly building up one's portfolio and very importantly, have a art station or Instagram account just so they could just push their portfolio to these global audiences. So in the future, they might be invited into a production that's happening in a foreign country, right? Mm-hmm. And oh yeah, sorry for interrupting you. So I remember this person was also asking about something about environment concept art. Do you remember what that part of the question was?
So they were actually mentioning specifically to get into the environment concept artist group, since there is a lot of competition in environment concept art compared to, say, maybe character concept artists or 3D modeling, due to the many requirements and environment concept artists needs to have. Um, so he's just talking about specifically for environment concept art, how can you tap into this industry?
Yes. Oh goodness. Yeah, his instinct was correct. It's because if he wants to work for a triple A studio, environment concept art was definitely more in demand compared to character design works. Because environment, as we all know, is the foundation of the world building. However, he's also correct about the many requirements in order to be good to go in this industry. We have to learn the 3D to 2D workflow. But it was not as hard as one may think. And luckily, there are so many tutorials out there produced by the industry professionals about how they could wrap these pieces from Blender and then put them back in Photoshop and then repaint over it. There are a lot of resources available for environment concept art. Competition is true, but luckily environment art is quite in demand. So there's a nice balance. Just
There's always like for hire for environment concept artists. I think one thing the question might have misunderstood is actually, I think the demand for environment concept artists will always be more than character artists, because it's quite common for I think especially fresh graduates to want to do character art in comparison to environment or prop art. But I think ironically environment and props are basically the two foundations to what creates a brand new world. I think if you cannot create a world where your new character can live in, then it will be very hard for the audience to get invested in it.
yes,
There's a reason why a lot of fresh graduates, or like even students, when they create their portfolio, they are encouraged to also have environment and props as well, because you can't tie it up as a package.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, goodness. Oh, I just want to add. Oh, sorry for interrupting you. There's actually nothing wrong want to be a character designer when you're in school and as a fresh graduate, because as we all know, the Asian market, our market was dominated by the mobile and online titles, and therefore characters, skins, weapons are so in demand. So there's always a way for the fresh graduate to find their market. If if the West, the America area wouldn't work for you, try to find some online opportunities in the Asian market. There's always a way to go.
I think one last question before we wrap this up.
Yes.
And I think, is there any advice you would like to give to fresh graduates that maybe they're struggling to find work? Like maybe they have tried applying to jobs, but they've been getting rejected. Do you have any advice for them?
Definitely. I got so many rejection letters when I graduated. You are definitely okay. Just don't look at them. Delete them. It's okay. It's a thing that will pass within 3 days, I promise you. but it's very good for for someone who's freshly graduated to reach out all the studios they can. If they see an junior or entry level position open, send a resume no matter what. There's always a chance, or just reach out to indie studios to see if they can produce an internship opportunities. Um, but but however, the hiring process is affected by a lot of things in which we cannot always guarantee that you will land on something instantly. So when someone who's just graduated and still in the process of grooming their portfolios to be presentable to the industry professionals, it's very good for them to seek advisors, to the industry professionals, to ask them to help them look at the portfolio, or even ask for mentorships. And it would probably be beneficial for them if they could ask the artist who's working for a company that they really liked to provide a mentorship for them if they have the budget, because it's there are internal hirings, and someone could always be there to do some recommendations in this process, and also an industry professional's personal opinions because of the project they worked on. I think they can better help these candidates to put their portfolio together, so when there's a spot of that company opening, this candidate is good to go.
I think also something I'd like to add on, just because you can't get into your dream companies now doesn't mean you can't do it later. As in, a lot of fresh graduates have this anxiety of like, if I don't get into the game industry the moment I graduate, I'm never going to get into it. I think that is a narrative that your lecturers like to do about. Don't believe your lecturers.
Oh,
At least in our local schools, a lot of lecturers they tend to say like, oh, when you graduate is the prime time you get a job. But I think times have changed. I think you can always work something else and then do a portfolio in the side the sidelines. I think at the end of the day, if you need to earn money, then that should be a priority. But I don't think there's I don't think there's this like glass ceiling or this invisible window of time for you to get this dream. There's always time. You're in your 20s. You may be less than 20.
yes. Well said. This is so well said.
I think this is something a lot of especially the current fresh graduates need to hear, especially with all this anxiety about like retrenchment and all that going on. A lot of people are very worried, but I think as much as reality can be harsh at times, I think it's also needed for some reassurance, But yes, I think that wraps up our interview session. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm so happy I could interview you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for watching. If you're watching, thank you very much.